Neon lights and dark secrets. The nightclub murders of Vancouver. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel of Nickel Investigations. This is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Welcome to tonight's episode. Neon lights and dark secrets. The nightclub murders of Vancouver. Vancouver, 1975. The city was a neon-lit playground by night, a mix of jazz bars, strip clubs, and underground gambling dens. But beneath the glitz and glamour, violence simmered, hidden in the shadows of back alleys and private booths. For three women, Gail Rogers, Barbara LaRocque, and Deborah Roe, the nightclub scene wasn't just a place to work. It was where they danced, sang, and dreamed. But it was also where they met their killers. A go-go dancer who vanished into the night. A young singer found drowned in just inches of water. A beautiful indigenous woman who was strangled with her own scarf. All three women worked in Vancouver's clubs. All three died violently. Police at the time believed their deaths were connected to the city's seedy underworld. Prostitution, drugs, and organized crime. But what if it wasn't just about vice? What if these women were silenced because of what they had seen? In this episode, we take you back to a city on the edge, a world of flashing lights and dark secrets, where a killer, or killers, walked free. And decades later, we still don't have the answers. This is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. And tonight, we step into Vancouver's dark side. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel, Nickel Investigations. This is Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Ontario Cold Cases is a gripping true crime podcast that shines a light on unsolved murders, disappearances, and forgotten crimes from across the province and the world. With meticulous research, compelling storytelling, and a commitment to historical accuracy, we bring you the real stories of victims, investigators, and suspects, stories that demand to be heard. Each week, we take you deep into the world of true crime with a packed schedule of episodes. Tuesdays, historical true crime cases, exploring infamous and obscure crimes from history. Wednesdays, the Mick and Mac Mysteries, a thrilling fictional detective series set in 1950s Toronto. Thursdays, World Cold Case Thursday, investigating unsolved cases from around the globe. Sundays, Ontario Cold Cases, the latest episode uncovering an unsolved mystery from Ontario. From high-profile crimes that shock the nation to little-known cases waiting for justice, we uncover the truth, one case at a time. Join us as we explore the dark corners of history and mystery, where every clue could lead to answers and every case deserves a second look. Subscribe now wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and never miss an episode of Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. Disappearances. On the night of February 17th, 1975, Gail Sandra Rogers, better known as Sam to her friends, finished her noon to 6 p.m. shift as a go-go dancer at the Penthouse Nightclub on Seymour Street and stepped out into the cold Vancouver air. She was never seen alive again. When Gail failed to show up in the following days, her sister Karen reported her missing. Police went to check her basement suite in Kitsilano and found something chilling: a blood-stained carpet and a claw hammer smeared with gore. Whatever had happened to Gail, it had happened violently. Detectives immediately linked her disappearance to another case that already sent shockwaves through the city: the murder of 22-year-old Barbara Ann LaRocque, a fellow go-go dancer who worked at the Penthouse in Syndicate City. Barbara's body had been found 2 months earlier, brutally discarded. Investigators told reporters they suspected a dark connection. Both women had ties to Vancouver's seedy underworld of drugs, prostitution, and the rough, neon-lit world of strip clubs. Then, just 5 days after Gail vanished, a gruesome discovery escalated the terror. In the woods of Langley, the body of 22-year-old Deborah Roe was found. A country and western singer who also worked as a cocktail waitress at the OK Corral, New Westminster, owned by the same people who ran Syndicate City. Debbie had suffered a horrific fate. She'd been sexually assaulted, strangled, and left to drown in just 6 inches of water. Her body was found barely 2 kilometers from where Barbara LaRocque's lifeless form had been dumped back on December 10, 1974. 3 women, all connected by the shadowy world of Vancouver's nightclub scene. A killer was on the loose. Deborah Roe and the murder of Debbie Roe. By 1975, 22-year-old Debbie Roe and her 17-year-old sister Vicky were living the dream, or so it seemed. For 4 years, the sisters had been singing together professionally, their harmonies earning them a shot in Nashville, where they recorded their country album, Soft, Sweet and Country. Backing up in the studio were some of the best musicians in the business. Charlie McCoy, the legendary session player, had worked with Elvis Presley, Bob Dylan, and Johnny Cash. But just weeks after the return home to British Columbia, that dream was shattered. The night Debbie disappeared. On the night of her murder, Debbie finished her shift at the OK Corral at New Westminster Bar, known for its live country music. It was just another late night on the road back to Langley. She made a brief stop, gas, and a quick bite at Denny's on King George Highway before heading home. She never made it. The next day, Debbie's blue Chevrolet Nova was found parked and locked in a desolate stretch of the Fraser Highway, near a spot called Fry's Corner. It was an eerie place to leave a car. Isolated, quiet. 7 kilometers away, a family out for a walk stumbled upon something far worse. Debbie's body. She'd been beaten, sexually assaulted, strangled, and left to drown in just 15 centimeters of water. A senseless, brutal end. Veteran coroner Doug Jack described it as an enraged, frustrated attack. A crime that made no sense. Debbie's car was pointed toward Langley, as if she'd been on her way home when something or someone stopped her. Nearby, investigators found a footprint, size 9, embedded in the dirt. They believed Debbie's car might have broken down, forcing her to hitchhike, unknowingly climbing into a killer's vehicle. But Kim Newman, Debbie's friend and roommate, wasn't buying it. That car was in really good shape. I used to drive it, Kim said flatly. I believe somebody did something to her car. Even more chilling was the thought that Debbie wouldn't have accepted a ride from just anyone. Would have had to be someone she recognized for her to get in the car with some guy, Kim insisted. The suspects and the endless questions. For decades, Debbie's family has been haunted by the question of who killed her. Was it a family friend, an older man infatuated with her? A current or former boyfriend? One of the 2 police officers who had stopped her on occasion, supposedly, just asked her out. A stranger from the OK Corral who had followed her from the bar. Someone she encountered at Denny's, who waited for the right moment. Or someone who tampered with her car, forcing her into a deadly trap. When DNA forensics emerged in the 1990s, the family finally had hope, only be told that the evidence had been lost. In 2003, police reopened the case, revealing that they had uncovered new information, but declined to say what it was. Over the years, dozens of detectives have worked Debbie's case, but if they ever had a suspect, they never told the Roe family. And so, the questions remain unanswered, the truth just out of reach. Who silenced Debbie Roe? And will her family ever get the justice they deserve? Barbara LaRocque. The life and murder of Barbara Ann LaRocque. Shelley was only 10 years old when her aunt, Barbara Ann LaRocque, was murdered, but time has done nothing to fade her memories. She was always the center of attention, always happy and smiling, Shelley recalls. And he was just living the 60s, free, groovy, enjoying life. With her thick, dark hair, vibrant smile, and a laugh that could fill a room, Barbara was impossible to ignore. Her family called her Baby Dolly. With big, bright eyes and curly hair, she looked like a doll come to life. But that life was cut short on December 10th, 1974. A murder in the night. That night, 22-year-old Barbara was outside the Syndicate Club in Howe Street, where she worked as a go-go dancer. She never made it home. Someone dragged her into a car and drove her into the darkness. Days later, her body was discovered in Langley, BC, strangled with her own scarf. She was somebody, Shelley says fiercely, and people loved her. But what had Barbara seen? What had she heard? Police suspected her murder wasn't random. According to investigators, Barbara's death was a hit, a contract killing meant to silence her. My mother was told by police that Barbara had overheard something she shouldn't have, Shelley reveals. That's why she was murdered. A tough life, a bright spirit. Barbara was one of 13 siblings, the seventh in a large, close-knit family. She made her home in an East Vancouver heritage house, but her official death certificate labeled her simply as a restaurant waitress from Swan River, Manitoba. People who knew Barb, or Barbie as they called her, remembered her as tall, stunning, and full of life. A young Indigenous woman with a bubbly laugh and a kind, positive spirit. She had a way of making people smile, no matter how hard life got. Linda Parrish met 16-year-old Barbara in 1968 inside the Willingdon School for Girls, a government-run juvenile detention center. Barb was very beautiful, Linda remembers. She was gentle, she was fun, she could always make you laugh. But Willingdon was no school. It was a prison for young girls, many locked away, not for crimes, but for incorrigibility. Talking back, running away from an abusive home, being poor. Even future BC Premier Dave Barrett, who was a young social worker in 1960, saw the horror of Willingdon firsthand. He called it a pipeline to drug addiction, prostitution, and alcoholism, a place that crushed young lives before they had a chance to begin. In 1974, just months before Barbara's murder, Barrett succeeded in shutting it down. Justice delayed or denied. Barbara's case finally started with the Langley RCMP, but at some point it was moved to the Unsolved Homicide Unit, and there it sat gathering dust. Decades later, her family still waits for justice. Barbara was more than a victim, more than a case number in an old police file. She was Baby Dolly, Barbie, a sister, an aunt, a young woman who was stolen from the people who loved her. And someone out there still knows why. Up next, Gail is found. Gail is found. For 3 long weeks, Gail Rogers' fate remained a mystery, till a chance encounter on a remote mountain road led to a gruesome discovery. It was Friday, March 7th, 1975. 3 American skiers were making their way to Whistler, winding through the rugged terrain north of Squamish along Alta Lake Road. They pulled over at a scenic viewpoint, eager to snap a few photos of the landscape. As they stood by the edge, something strange caught their eye. A rolled-up blanket lying motionless in the shallow creek, 12 meters below the bridge. Curiosity turned to dread as they lobbed a few rocks at the bundle. The water shifted, and what emerged froze them in place. 2 human feet, pale and lifeless, protruding from the folds of the blanket. Shaken, the skiers rushed to the Squamish RCMP detachment, leading officers back to the grisly scene. Unwrapping the soaked fabric revealed the full horror. Gail being bound at the ankles and knees, her wrists tied behind her back, her feet lashed together with strips of cloth. Around her neck, 2 pieces of clothing were knotted tightly. She'd been hurled off the bridge head first. Her life brutally ended by 5 hammer blows to the skull. Police determined she'd been dumped into the water less than 24 hours after her murder. But why'd she been killed? Gail had only been working at the Penthouse for about a month when she vanished. Her older sister Karen was convinced that her job as a go-go dancer had placed her in grave danger. The police told me they knew who did it. Karen later revealed they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. Then came the most chilling detail of all. Another dancer at the Penthouse had confided to police that Gail had overheard something she shouldn't have. A whispered secret. A fatal mistake. Authorities suspected she'd been marked for death, a hit arranged to silence her forever. But if the police knew the killer's identity, why had justice never come? Early life. The bright spirit of Gail Rogers. Gail Rogers was a force of nature, outgoing, fun, and fiercely generous, with a laugh that could lift any room. She had a great sense of humor, her sister Karen recalls. She was an excellent dancer, an honors student at Langley Senior Secondary, and she'd even studied at the Vancouver School of Art. But behind her vibrant energy, life had begun to unravel. Shortly before her disappearance, heartbreak hit hard. Gail's longtime boyfriend, someone she had trusted, betrayed her in the worst way, cheating on her with her own roommate. The pain was fresh, and she was still reeling from the fallout when she vanished. The nightclub years. In the early 1970s, Gail and Karen lived together in Vancouver's West End, sharing the electric pulse of the city's nightlife. They both worked at the Factory, a nightclub on Davie Street. Karen as a server, Gail as a go-go dancer, dazzling crowds under the flashing lights. Then life pulled them apart. For a few years, the sisters became estranged. Karen lost track of where Gail worked or what she was doing. But just before the murder, they had started to reconnect, rebuilding the bond they had once shared. Neither of them knew their time was running out. Up next, the identification, a sister's nightmare. The identification, a sister's nightmare. It was Karen who sounded the alarm when their mother couldn't reach Gail. I fully expected the police to say, "We can't do anything. She has been missing for 48 hours. But instead they went straight over, Karen recalls. When they called her back, their words sent a chill down her spine. There was no sign of forced entry, they told her, but one detail made her heart drop. Gail's bed wasn't made. I knew right away something was wrong, Karen says. My sister was meticulous about her bed. A chilling reunion at the morgue. Weeks later, it was Karen who had to identify Gail's body. At Lionsgate Hospital morgue, she walked in, flanked by 2 burly detectives. The moment felt unreal. When they pulled the drawer open, there was a big towel wrapped around her head, Karen remembers. She just looked like she was sleeping. I had the strangest reaction. I wanted to shake her awake. I wanted to say, "Come on, Gail. Wake up. Let's go home." But there was no waking up from this. The forgotten evidence. It was Karen, too, who went down to Vancouver Police Headquarters to identify Gail's jewelry and the quilt she'd been wrapped in when she was found. Yet as decades passed, the silence from the police became deafening. In 2021, Karen revealed something shocking. She had never heard from the police again after 1975. The Vancouver Police Department stole Gail's personal belongings, or at least they never tried to return them. In 2006, Karen's daughter Sarita tried to breathe life back into the case, contacting the VPD to ask for it to be reopened. The response? Cold and dismissive. We won't look at it again unless we get new evidence or a deathbed confession. A confession from a ghost. The case remained exactly where it had been left, buried in the past. A clue in the night. The blood at the Chevron. It's a quiet February night in 1975 when Vancouver Police Constable Brian Honeyborn got a call that would haunt him for decades. It was 2:30 a.m. and he was working the night shift in South Vancouver when dispatch directed him to a Chevron station at Renfrew Street and Grandview Highway. The reason? Blood. A lot of it. When I got there, the attendant told me 2 grungy biker types had pulled in driving a beat-up old car to get gas, Honeyborn recalls. After they left, he found a pool of blood right where the car had been parked. He thought it had leaked out of the trunk. The bikers never stepped out of the vehicle. The attendant had filled their tank while they sat inside. He had still managed to get a fairly good look at them. With Highway 1 just a short distance away, Honeyborn assumed they'd taken off eastbound. He immediately radioed dispatch, instructing them to alert Burnaby RCMP to watch for the car. But he never considered the possibility that instead of heading east, he turned left on Rupert Street, crossed the Second Narrows Bridge, and disappeared into Squamish, where weeks later, Gail's body would be found. The blood connection. At the time, DNA testing didn't exist, but forensic specialists were able to type the blood. It was a match. Same blood type as Gail Rogers. Honeyborn collected the blood using paper towels, carefully placing them in an evidence bag before sending them to forensics. But looking back, he wishes he had done more. The contract killing. Years later, Honeyborn, by then a seasoned investigator, believed Gail's murder was a hit. What I should have done in hindsight, he admits. Seize the money they paid the attendant with. We could have dusted it for fingerprints. But in 1975, he's just a young constable. Homicides weren't his specialty. By 1996, Honeyborn had climbed the ranks to detective sergeant with the Provincial Unsolved Homicide Unit. He worked on cold cases and solved many of them. But Gail's case? We never looked into it, he says. Would DNA evidence have changed everything? Maybe. But the paper towels that held Gail's blood, one of the only physical links to her killers, are long gone. And with them, a crucial piece of the puzzle may have disappeared forever. Up next, evidence vanished. A cold case left in the dark. Evidence vanished. A cold case left in the dark. No clothes, no personal possessions, no murder weapon. Every piece of evidence that could have held the key to Gail Rogers' murder, gone, thrown out. Even tracking down her case file turned into a wild goose chase. It wasn't with the Squamish RCMP where her body was found. Instead, it was buried in the archives of the Vancouver Police Department. Untouched for decades. A few yellow paper files stuffed into old bankers' boxes, collecting dust. In October 2021, Sophia was urged to contact the Vancouver Police Department again. With modern DNA testing, was there any chance the murder weapon, the hammer, had been kept? What about the blood-soaked paper towels from the Chevron station? Any evidence could finally point to her killer. What she got was a text from a Vancouver Police Department detective. And it wasn't good news. Quote, "There is a note in the file that reads, to dispose of the exhibits. Unfortunately, there's no date associated with the note, so I don't even know when this was ordered. I can't speak for things how were done in the 1970s. But since I came on the job in 1999, any exhibits from a homicide file would not be destroyed now." The detective also confirmed something that shattered any hope of recovering Gail's last possessions. Her jewelry, a necklace, and 2 bracelets, along with the quilt that her sister Karen identified back in 1975, thrown out. The only record of Gail's belongings was a brief note. On March 11, 1975, police returned $171 in cash and a couple of checks to her father. The lost leads. With no physical evidence left, investigators could only rely on old reports. Most of them faded, incomplete, or useless. No helpful fingerprints were found at Gail's residence. Documents sent by fax had degraded beyond readability. Her former boyfriend Michael, being a prime suspect, but was cleared within 4 days of her disappearance. And then, there was one more chilling note in the file. A $200 contract had been taken out on Gail to give her a beating. Was that the motive? Did a simple warning escalate into murder? The detective, however, was quick to dismiss it. There was nothing else in the file to corroborate that rumor, so in my opinion, I would categorize it as hearsay. Hearsay or not, somebody wanted Gail hurt. And someone out there, somebody still knows why. Up next, going undercover, infiltrating the penthouse. Going undercover, infiltrating the penthouse. By the spring of 1975, the Lower Mainland nightclub scene was a battleground. While Seattle and Montreal operators had tried to muscle in, local club owners had fought them off, determined to keep their turf. But even without outside interference, the Vancouver nightclub world was anything but tame. Enter Don Winterton, the newly appointed Vancouver police chief. Taking over in 1974, he had a clear mission: to crack down on prostitution. And at the top of his hit list, the penthouse. Just 3 months after Gail Rogers' murder, the Vancouver Police Department launched one of its most ambitious undercover operations, a full-scale infiltration of the nightclub, targeting its criminal underbelly. The officer assigned to the job, a fresh-faced 21-year-old rookie named Leslie Schultz. Deep cover in the underworld. There was a career-defining first case for Schultz. Her assignment: posed as a high-end sex worker inside the penthouse. The investigation would stretch nearly a year, involving 12 Vice Squad officers, hidden cameras, wiretaps, and an astronomical $2 million budget, equivalent to about $10 million in today's dollars. Between May and August, Schultz visited the penthouse 15 times, her identity concealed beneath a short brunette wig and the polished look of a high-priced escort. On May 15, 1975, she walked through the club doors just after 10 o'clock p.m., paid the $2.95 cover charge, and was escorted to the lower gold room. There were 50 to 60 women inside. Most were working girls. Schultz may not have uncovered anything about Gail's murder, but what she did see was a city's hidden criminal empire in full swing. Pimps, drug dealers, brutal enforcers. Nasty crooks were given a safe place to have meetings there, Scholes later recalled. Beatings were not uncommon. There was fierce competition between pimps, and the owners and employees fully cooperated. And it went deeper. He saw familiar faces, not just criminals, but well-known television personalities, and even government officials, all tangled in the club's dark dealings. The Penthouse wasn't just a nightclub. It was a fortress of corruption. And for those who got in too deep, like Gail Rogers, getting out wasn't an option. Up next, the Penthouse sting. Arrests, scandals, and murder. The Penthouse sting. Arrests, scandals, and murder. By December 22, 1975, the Penthouse investigation exploded into a full-blown scandal. After months of undercover work, wiretaps, and secret recordings, police moved in. The arrests came fast and hit high places. Joe Filippone, the Penthouse owner. Ross Filippone, the club manager. Dominic Mickey Filippone, who ran the dining room. Mickey's daughter Rose, a 21-year-old cashier. Jan Sadlock, the doorman and club enforcer. Minerva Kelly, the hostess. The charges? Conspiracy to live off the avails of prostitution and corrupting public morals. The trial that rocked Vancouver. The trial kicked off on September 1st, 1976, dominating headlines for 6 months as 45 witnesses took the stand, peeling back the layers of Vancouver's seedy nightclub underworld. Sex workers, many of them also police informants, testified in disguise, detailing how the Penthouse operated as a well-oiled machine for high-priced prostitution. On any given night, up to 100 sex workers packed the club. Clients were charged between $60 and $75 per half hour. Women paid a $2.95 entry fee, plus mandatory tips to the doorman and cashier for premium seating. If they left with a client, they had to pay again to re-enter, while the clients only paid once. Male customers could use their credit cards to get cash advances for sex, with a 20% surcharge going straight to the Penthouse. The smoking gun. Most damning evidence came from a taped interview played in court. On it, Ross Filippone was heard casually explain the club's policy to undercover officer Leslie Scholes. "We don't give a damn whether you have a trick or not. Once you go out, that is it. We don't ask for no cut off your trick, right? Right?" Despite the overwhelming evidence, justice barely touched the Penthouse empire. Only Joe and Ross were sentenced. A mere 60 days in jail and fines. Even that was overturned on appeal. Violence, drugs, and the murder that followed. The Penthouse survived, but not everyone involved did. In 1983, Joe Filippone was shot and killed in a robbery at the club. His brothers Ross and Mickey are also long gone. Yet against all odds, the Penthouse remains a family-run business to this day. A city drenched in blood. As the Vancouver Police Department's investigation into the Penthouse wound down in August 1975, Vancouver's drug war was just heating up. The West Coast underworld was in chaos, and organized crime was flooding the city with heroin. According to the Montreal Gazette, the numbers were staggering. 15 murders in Vancouver that year. At least 7 were linked to drugs. Police braced for more bodies. The killing that has broken out in the drug community exposes the extent to which organized crime and related heroin trafficking have become a subculture of society in this West Coast port. To police, Gail Rogers and Barbara LaRocque weren't just tragic victims. They were casualties of a city spiraling into a war where life was cheap and silence was deadly. 3 women, Gail Rogers, Barbara LaRocque, and Deborah Roe, were taken too soon, their lives stolen in brutal, senseless killings. Decades later, their cases remain unsolved. What did they know? Who silenced them? And why has justice never come? The nightclub world of 1970s Vancouver was a dangerous place, filled with secrets that many were willing to kill for. And while the lights of the city have changed, the darkness remains. If you or someone you know has any information about these cases, please contact the authorities. These women deserve answers. Their families deserve closure. And their killers do not deserve to walk free. Thank you for listening to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. We're available wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Substack, and more. And if you have a case you think we should cover, reach out. You can find us on social media or visit Nickel Investigations to share your tips or theories. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, keep searching for the truth. Because every case deserves answers, and every victim deserves justice. With files from Eve Lazarus, Cold Case BC, the stories behind the province's most sensational murder and missing person cases, and the Montreal Gazette.